Madam President, I'm very pleased to be on the floor today with my colleague, Senator Hirono, to express our strong support for the nomination of Dr. Geeta Rao Gupta to be Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues at the Department of State. Now, the position that Dr. Gupta has been nominated for leads the Office of Global Women's Issues, which is charged with advancing the rights and empowerment of women and girls around the world through U.S. foreign policy. So, looking at our foreign policy through a gender lens that recognizes that women are half of the world's population. Now, not only does the Office of Global Women's Issues prioritize policies and programs to advance the status of women around the world, it ensures that U.S. policies incorporate a gender lens at all levels of policy and decision-making. The last 2.5 years of the COVID-19 pandemic have demonstrated why this office is more important than ever before. Around the world over those last 2.5 years, the gender gap has grown as a result of the pandemic. Girls are dropping out and staying out of school at a higher rate than boys. The female labor force participation rate has declined, with women not only holding less secure jobs, but also taking on more unpaid work at home with childcare and housing. Gender-based violence has increased to such an extent that UN Women, the UN body charged with advancing the rights of women globally, now warns of what they call, and I quote, a shadow pandemic of violence. These are issues of great consequence to half of the world's population. They cannot be an afterthought. Gender equity, equality, and the empowerment of women and girls must be a focal point of U.S. foreign policy. And that's exactly what the Ambassador at Large is intended to facilitate. Unfortunately, this position has been unfilled for too long. Over the past 5 years, beginning in the Trump administration, the position of the Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues has been filled for only 1 year, so 20% of the time over the last 5 years. During that time, we've endured an unprecedented global pandemic. We've ended a 20-year war in Afghanistan. We've watched as Vladimir Putin launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine. We've experienced a supply chain crisis and suffered a global food shortage. And in every single one of these crises, women have been more acutely affected than men, and affected in a different way than men. During the pandemic, women, who make up almost 70% of the healthcare workforce, have been those who have been on the front lines of providing care for the sick and vulnerable. And with the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, women's rights have been rolled back at an unprecedented rate, and we have seen 90% of the households in Afghanistan have food insecurity, and women are experiencing the greatest part of that. Displacement from the war in Ukraine has left millions of women vulnerable to human trafficking, even as Russia continues to shell their homes and communities. And the food insecurity from the supply chain crisis and global food shortage has reinforced our understanding of what we've seen for too long, that in times of hunger, it is women who eat last and who eat the least. Through all of these crises, the Office of Global Women's Issues has been without a leader to spearhead its work to ensure that women's needs are incorporated in every aspect of the United States response to these crises. Now, why does that matter? Well, not only do women make up 50% of the world's population, but what we know is that where women are empowered, they contribute, give back more to their families, they give back more to their communities. The countries that empower women are more stable, they're more economically secure. This is a policy that is important not only to our foreign policy writ large, but to our national security. And that's why we need to fill this position and why we urgently need to confirm Dr. Gupta. Dr. Gupta has spent her career in service to gender equality and women's empowerment. She knows better than most the impact that unfair gender norms and inequalities have on women and the importance of prioritizing women's leadership. And what's so unfortunate is that Dr. Gupta is being punished for her personal views on women's reproductive choices. And as the result of those personal views, those groups who oppose women's reproductive choices are spreading falsehoods instead of facts. And they're doing that, and unfortunately, too many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been willing to listen to those falsehoods without really looking at the facts. This sets a very dangerous precedent for all future nominees. Let me be clear. The Office of Global Women's Issues does not lead on sexual and reproductive health and rights, nor does it provide information about abortion services. When former President Trump nominated someone to lead the Office of Global Women's Issues, I and my pro-choice colleagues in this body didn't ask her what her position was on choice because we knew that that was not the mission of the Office of Global Women's Issues. And she was confirmed. And I think by all accounts, people thought she did a good job in the short time that she was there. So why are my Republican colleagues spreading these falsehoods? They've said that Dr. Gupta has advised the World Health Organization to support abortion as a human right. They've alleged that Dr. Gupta gave a speech saying that abortion should be an essential service. They've alleged the administration has plans to include abortion in the mandate of the Office of Global Women's Issues. Let me be clear. There is no truth behind those allegations. If you missed it, let me say it again. There is no truth behind those allegations. We cannot let this idea that because somebody has a personal position on an issue that affects them, that means that they cannot be considered for a position within the government. You know, based on that criteria, I wouldn't be able to be considered for any position. So for the sake of Dr. Gupta's nomination today and for the sake of all of those qualified women candidates who are going to come before the Senate in the future, we can't let this divisive move become the status quo. We have got to correct the record. We need to approve Dr. Gupta, and we need to get the Office of Global Women's Issues back operating at full capacity.